for the Commerce Development Services. Pastor David Ferguson and his wife Whitney have 4 children and live right here in Commerce, across the street from me. So, Pastor David, we are certainly glad to have you tonight. Please come forward and lead us in the invocation.
Let's pray together. Father in heaven, we acknowledge you tonight as we gather here, that you are the one who made us and oversees this city. You are the ultimate governor of all that happens here in our city. We acknowledge that. We recognize the roles that you have granted us to play. We thank you for our city council members and how you have appointed them to seek the welfare of this city. We pray that you would give them wisdom as they do that. And we also acknowledge, Father, that you are the one who establishes the steps that we might make our plans. I would imagine make our plans. I would imagine that. And thank you again. We trust that you are working for our good in all things. In Jesus' name,
Amen. Thank you, Pastor David. For our Pledge of Allegiance tonight, we have Sean Lamantz. Sean is a graduate student at Texas Tech working toward his master's in nursing education. He and his wife live north of Commerce. He is here tonight to fulfill requirements for his final project in his leadership course regarding policymaking. Thank you for being here tonight, Sean. So please stand. Please take a look. Do we have any questions on our consent agenda tonight?
Mayor, if I may, I know we want to pull from the consent agenda one of the bullets under item 4B, which is the appointment of Araceli Castro. That is not an alternate position, but a regular position on that board. And so we want to modify how that one gets adopted. But there was also some question about the final bullet under 4B. Here to be mistakes, but he's just taking an old document and laying a new date on it. And then one of the things that we've found is as we take his files and put them into Agendas, which is our agenda software, sometimes it scrambles the software and creates pages and pages and pages of code that isn't in English. And so we've tried to find ways to take his files and change the way they get uploaded into Agendas, and that image sometimes distorts what he turned in. And so
Planning and Zoning Commission and to the Neighborhood Empowerment Zone Agreement.
I still want to pull down the last bullet point to talk about it.
Okay?
And we're going to pull the second one as well?
I would. Mhm.
Yes. So those 2 items have been removed from the consent agenda.
And so there was a vacancy on the Planning and Zoning as a regular member, and the Planning and Zoning doesn't have alternate members. And so when we brought her application forward, it's not an alternate position. And so if we would approved the consent agenda as presented, you'd have placed her in an alternate position that doesn't exist.
Didn't exist, right.
And so we're asking for approval of the council to put Ms. Castro on the Planning and Zoning Commission as a regular member.
Okay, having said that, are there any questions for the city manager's explanation? There being none, do we have a motion?
So
I'm
move.
second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed,
Us to hold off as far as adopting this one to the next meeting to get cleaned up documentation.
Okay.
so I believe we would need a motion to table that to our November city council meeting.
I
move
move
that we
then.
table it till
Table it. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll make that motion to table.
I'll second.
Okay? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. All right. Now to address your comments tonight. If there is any clarification that needs to be made from the council to the public, our city manager, Heidi Lisenby, will address that. At the end of our city council meeting tonight, he does have a period in the agenda where he will address all the public comments that are made tonight. So the first card that I received tonight is from Patricia Fuentes. If you would please come forward. Please state your name again, because I'm not sure that I said it correctly. And provide us your address, please.
Okay, yes, sir. Can I provide you some copies of documents that I'd like you to have before?
Please. Good evening. Okay, thank you. I don't
No, we
know.
don't have the ability to broadcast stuff live.
Okay, all right. Good evening, everyone, and members of the community. My name is Patricia Cifuentes, and I live at 1800 Jefferson Street in Commerce, Texas. And before I begin, I want to thank all of you for being here, especially Howdy Lazimbi, and I always say his name wrong, and Chief Basham. I've had the honor of meeting and speaking with him before. I'm here tonight to discuss a zoning ordinance issue, and I provide alcohol, and they actually even have valet parking. They're parking people at the Church of Christ parking lot at night, and then having them walk and escorting them with vests and lights down my street at all hours, and the parties do not stop. The one last night stopped at 3:45 this morning, and there's one that's actually on my street right now that's starting. I wish I could show that to you, but I cannot. But this is on my Ring app. It goes off constantly throughout the day, and at night it doesn't stop. And I've had officers, it's going off now. People are on my property. If it's going on, it's because people are near my property, passing my property at all hours of the night. And I've had the police officers out to my house who've actually threatened to take my dog once because she was barking at them and doing her little job trying to protect Mom. As a mom, as a teacher, and as a member of this community, I've spoken to you before. I moved here because of the university. I have 4 children that are getting ready to go to the university, and I'm really proud of that. And I'm proud of this community. But I think we need to come together somehow to work together with the community, with the students of the university, to come together and find a place where they can party and have a good time without violating some noise ordinances, without violating the peace, and making a hard job on Chief Basham and his officers. Because I've called several times over the past 3 years to no avail. And the last thing I want to do is press charges because these kids have a future, and I don't want to be the one who steps on that for them because they want to have a good time. And we were all young ones, and we invite children, young adults to come to this community to learn in a safe environment, and I want them to do that, and I want to provide that for them. And I also I understand that they want to, release some of that energy they have, and I'm all about that. But I think we need to come together finally and put together a task force of some sort with the university, with members of the council, with the community, and find a place where they can do that in a safe way without being in our neighborhoods and destroying property. They threatened my husband and I. And my last call to the police station was this past Sunday at 12:45 a.m. on a Sunday. And so I'm asking for help. I'm reaching out to you to help me find a peaceful resolution to the matter and help our chief of police and Mr. Lazimbi and all of you to bring our community together and not have a great divide. And that's all I have to say.
Can you explain to me, I'm ignorant, what exactly is a rave
Oh.
party? as briefly
They
as you can.
became, I've done a lot of research, and I provided Mayor Reel with some items from the Department of Homeland Security, I think, or the Department of Justice. They have, I printed it out for you so that you can go over that material. They give you some suggestions and things on how to handle those things, but apparently they became really popular in 2017 in the UK. And what happens is, because of social media, these kids get on Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, and they text each other the address of an underground party that'll start up right away. And the police try their best to monitor that kind of activity online, but it's really impossible with a small task force. And so what happens at these parties is they charge the people that come there. It's either bring your own beer or they supply it, and they charge you an entry fee. And most of the parties are, I'm not saying this one is, but that's my alarm going off. I'm sorry, I'll turn it off. They'll provide alcohol, and they do not check IDs, and they also provide illicit drugs. And the DOJ handout that I gave you, actually, is that, I think I'm saying that right. I'll tell you what it says. It's
Who exactly are
Department of
they?
Councilman,
Justice.
I'm
please,
sorry.
Department of
Councilman,
Justice.
Yeah.
please
I'm
hold your
sorry.
comments to the end, please.
Yes, sir.
It's this whole handout I
I'm sorry.
printed out for you for raid parties from the U.S. Department of Justice. And so they provide, unfortunately, opportunities for people to hand out ecstasy, fentanyl. Vicks Vapor Rub is a big deal because it kind of helps them with the effects of the ecstasy. I'm learning a lot. And you find them sucking on those little pacifiers candy, because apparently the ecstasy gives them this desire to chew all night. And so it's people have died in these parties. That's actually a movie that my daughter actually showed me. And kids die at these events. And
Ms. Fuentes, I appreciate your
So,
comments tonight. I hate to interrupt, but we do need to move on to the next public
yes,
comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next card I have is from Yuri Fuentes.
Part of this tragedy, I want to apologize. I want to take my 2 minutes as well. So
Yes, sir.
Follow up with my wife. That beautiful lady happens to be my wife. And I'm amazed that there has to be some kind of a city ordinance that do not allow 100 people in one house. That's how much we figure. 20 cars, 4 people in it, so that's, do the math, that's 100 people. Fire marshal is not involved. I'm pretty sure that he will throw a fit to see how many people in one house. Stay smart. I gotta give it to them, you know, for best, lights, everything. Please don't go this way because we must call the police. And actually, we wait to, what, decent time. 12 o'clock, 12:30, I think that's good. And then we bother the city, the police for something that break the party. So I'm asking now, let's get together. Let's get together and find out a safe place for them to have fun. And leave comfortably with everybody. Love the city. I like it. I know it comes to the territory, there's a big couch, whatever, yeah, some noise, not a problem, but Sunday night, Wednesday night, I don't know, but me, I'm a student, I wanna hit both. It's a time for party, it's time for study. So, I'm not taking more of your time, I really want to apologize for you as well, and my wife is calling constantly. I'm sorry about that, I mean, I'm sometimes, the wait. But she's right, we've been accused of being racist as well. Hello? That's Latina. So, it's gonna get ugly, I'm afraid. I'm afraid it's gonna get ugly. So, respectfully request, let's work it out, let's find out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fuentes. The next card I have is from Frank Higgins. Mr. Higgins, please come forward and provide us your address, please. Very well, sir.
May not remember me from last month. My
Yes,
name is
sir.
Frank Higgins. I live at 1010 Bodart currently. I bought a place on North Neal Street. I'm renovating an older house. It came to my attention about Park Street being a TxDOT right-of-way. So I did some research. I contacted TxDOT in Greenville, Texas, Mr. Atkins,
Mhm.
James Atkins.
Hello, James.
I talked to him, I emailed him, and he said the reason that they're using North Park Street for semi-trucks is we don't have a dedicated truck route to route them around downtown Commerce. There's no markings, there's no truck route markings whatsoever. I did some research and found out that we, as Commerce, can get the truck route signs for about $17 from Amazon that are approved by TxDOT. I made sure that James would approve the size, the wording and everything. Pole from Home Depot, about $24. And I would suggest that once we do this, if you do this, that we put a flashing light, an orange flashing light on the top of every truck route sign, so that will attract the attention of the truck driver, since they cannot see, evidently, the no-through truck signs that we have all over the city to prevent these trucks from destroying our city streets and our residential streets. I talked to you last month about North Neal Street. That's continuing. It hasn't stopped. It's just, I mean, I go and work on my house and I see 5 or 6 of them drive down through there every week. 30, 40, 50 miles an hour, just barreling down. But I would be glad to get with anybody on this. And if you want to do this, I will be more than happy to donate my labor to put these up to prevent this from happening. Once we do this, we contact TxDOT. James will come out, he'll ride the truck route that we provided. He will release Park Street back into Commerce City, no longer a route for trucks, and it will be handled by Commerce at that point. Once that's done, then of course it's up to the chief and his men to take care of the violators that violate the truck route signs. But I rode the route, and there are no truck route signs anywhere to direct truckers around Commerce to go to 224, down 11, or up 19, or anything like this. So the only ones that they've known, because of past dealings, is the one that's coming right downtown through Park Street. So that's pretty much, pretty simple solutions, pretty inexpensive, comparatively speaking. And I appreciate your time this time, and I'm sure I will be back. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. The next card I have is from Judy Fain. I hope I said that correctly. Please come forward and state your address.
Good evening, council and members of the public. My name is Judy Fain. I live at 915 Sycamore Street. I just want to thank you for taking the time to hear what I have to say this evening. I come before you today to discuss the recently installed no parking signs on Sycamore Street. These signs have been installed between Park and the railroad tracks going toward the cemetery. I've owned a house on this stretch of road since 2001, and during all these many years, parking on the street has never been an issue. In fact, it's only recently become an issue because of one house, and that is the house located on the corner of Sycamore and Park. It became a rental house a couple of years ago, and since that time, the renters have been parking on the street. They are basically blocking when you turn the corner or when you cross Sycamore and you go over Park and down to the other end. They're breaking laws regarding parking in Texas. Texas parking laws state that you cannot park in a way that would hinder or obstruct traffic turning the corner. The current occupants of said property have consistently parked in a manner that obstructs traffic crossing the street from the other side of Sycamore over Park, and traffic turning the corner from Park Street onto Sycamore Street. I find it strange that the entire street of Sycamore has recently been inundated with no parking signs up and down the street, except the house on the corner that's causing the problem. In fact, it is my understanding from Police Chief Bassam that the house in question has actually been given an easement to keep parking at the corner of the intersection, thus causing their cars to obstruct traffic, turning the corner and crossing over Park. Furthermore, I do think the decision to install these no parking signs was not made in a manner conducive to equity or inclusion. No residents of Sycamore Street were surveyed regarding the installation of these signs, thus no inclusion. There's no equity in the decision-making process, being that the house causing the issue of obstructing traffic has been granted an easement, and all the rest of us are no longer allowed to park on the street, which we don't do anyway. It's never been a problem. The house on the corner actually has a driveway even, but for some reason they've been given an easement to keep obstructing traffic. Officer Basham told me the decision was made in part due to cars speeding on the street, and the hope was that the no parking signs would slow them down. Honestly, this makes no sense to me in that it only keeps the street clear and allows the cars to continue speeding down Sycamore Street. One last thing, between Monroe and Park, which is 4 blocks, there are 6 no parking signs. Between Park and Division, which is 4 blocks, there are 26 no parking signs now. These signs are, actually they're ugly, and they've just changed the whole look of the street. It's no longer a nice, pleasant street to live on, because as soon as you pull over, you see all these hideous no parking signs. I request that the council put in an order to have the no parking signs removed. They are an eyesore and have entirely changed the look of the street. Furthermore, compared to some other streets, including the part of Sycamore that runs between Washington and Park, there are just far too many signs installed. My neighbor has 2 in front of her house. I know I'm not the only resident that feels this way, because I went around and surveyed the other houses to find out how they felt about it, and all of my neighbors find the signs disgusting and want them removed. So I request that you please remove the signs so that the situation may come to an equitable end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fain. That is all of the cards that I have tonight. Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to address the council? There being none, we'll move on to item number 6 on the agenda, and let me say thank you to all the folks that came publicly and spoke tonight. Item 6 on the agenda is public hearing, discussion, and consideration of a resolution establishing a City of Commerce Property Assessed Clean Energy PACE program. Mr. Lisenby, City Manager.
Mayor, Council, what we have here is an opportunity to create a program called PACE, which is the Property Assessed Clean Energy Program. And the state of Texas authorized the use of PACE programs. Let me see if I can find the year. I think it was 2013. And so what PACE is an economic development and financing tool in which commercial, industrial, and large multifamily properties that are looking to make investments and improvements in their properties that result in energy efficiency savings. They have special financing options that allow them to finance those energy improvements in a way that make a better business case for their property, which incentivizes them to take and renovate older buildings and improve the energy efficiency. The role that the city plays is simply in facilitating these exchanges. And so we have currently one industrial customer, Nexi, which purchased the old Covidian building off of Maple. They're in the process of renovating that facility. It's a little over 300,000 square feet. They'll be moving in a manufacturing process, ultimately employing 200 to 250 people within our community. And so part of the renovation is replacing and upgrading all of the energy components of that large building. Traditional financing for energy projects, traditional lenders will only give you a short loan period of 5 to 8 years. And so if you have a large investment that you have to pay back in 5 to 8 years, that's a hard business case to make in terms of the cash flow and the profitability of your business. But through a PACE program, they can take that same bank and that same financing and stretch it out 10, 15, 20 years, depending on the life of the assets they're installing. And that makes it more beneficial for the business that's putting these improvements in. And so it's a financing tool that private companies make with private lenders. And so there are no city funds, there's no city resources. The city's not putting anything into this development tool, except the property owner agrees that they will place effectively a tax lien against their property so that the repayment of that financing bears the guarantee that if they default on that payment, there's a tax lien that can be foreclosed. And so the banks and the finance companies take that as collateral, and they're much more willing to lend money for these improvements. So that tool, only cities have the authority to place tax liens within our city. And so a private owner will decide, in this case, Nexi, we want to do a renovation to this 300,000 square foot building, which will include a large amount of money in energy efficiency savings, and we want to finance it through this PACE program. They voluntarily agree to have a tax lien placed against their property, and once that financing tool is paid off, the lien is removed. And so the only role the city plays effectively is placing the lien. So you have a private corporation and a private financer working together to do this improvement, and our role is to work with them to place a tax lien on the property. And so Texas authorized PACE programs, and so now cities and counties have to then adopt a PACE program within their jurisdiction. And so if the City of Commerce adopts and creates this PACE program, that becomes an economic development tool that can be used to help investment in renovations and reclaiming some of our older facilities and updating them to more current codes. And it makes the likelihood of private investment in our community greater. And so staff supports this, one, because there's not any risk to the city. We're not putting any of our financial assets into the program. We're not committing staff time into the administration of this program. We're simply using the authority we have to place tax liens that are voluntarily being requested. And so last month we passed a resolution of intent stating that we're looking at and considering the creation of a PACE program. We then published a report to the community and through our website that outlines what the PACE program would look like, how it would be administered, and there's been approximately a month of time that the public could review that program. And so tonight our steps are to open a public hearing to see if there's any questions or concerns from the public about this program, and then at the conclusion of the public hearing, council has the option to pass a resolution creating this PACE program. And staff is recommending approval of that resolution to create it. If council chooses to create this program, then the next item, which is directly connected, is hiring a private third-party administrator to manage those PACE applications. Because when a corporation, we'll say Nexi in this case, decides they want to do a PACE program, they have an application that they submit, and city staff would have to review that application. Then there's an analysis to determine, will this project really result in energy savings? And if so, what is the life of that project? That evaluation would have to be done by city staff. And so we're proposing to hire a third party to do all of that administration, and they manage the assessments, the evaluations, and if you have a private corporation or a private company and you have a finance team and they're all agreeable to do this project and it meets those criteria, then they have access to the PACE funding. And so we're recommending that we hold the public hearing tonight and approve the resolution. If that's done, then we'll consider entering into a professional services agreement with Texas PACE Authority to administer that program. So we're happy to answer any questions, and we're recommending a public hearing.
Before I open the public hearing, are there any questions for the city manager from the council? There being none, it is 6:38, and I open the public hearing. There being no one coming forward, at 6:39, I close the public hearing. So now, we need a motion.
I move that we approve the resolution establishing the City of Commerce Property Assessment Clean Energy PACE program.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 7, discussion and possible action on the approval of a professional services agreement between the City of Commerce, Texas, and Texas Property Assessed Clean Energy Authority, PACE. Mr. Lisby.
Mayor, Council, I want to introduce and invite Ms. Charlene to the podium. She represents Texas PACE Authority. When Texas authorized the creation of a PACE program statewide, Texas PACE Authority and some of their founders were involved in that process to create the program. And so they operate a 501c3. They're a nonprofit, and they administer PACE programs for the jurisdictions within the state of Texas. And so we are proposing that we enter into a professional services agreement with their firm so that they would administer the PACE program on behalf of the City of Commerce. And one of the questions that sometimes gets asked is, well, how can the city contract with somebody without going through a bidding process? Because we're not paying any money. And that's kind of the beautiful thing about it is that PACE Authority, and I'll let Charlene cover some of that, their funding is through the private companies that are applying for and the project that creates this PACE project. And so there are application fees that get paid that creates the funding that PACE uses. So throughout this agreement, the city is not using taxpayer dollars to fund Texas PACE Authority or fund this private investment in energy efficiency. And so, Ms. Charlene, I want to introduce you, let you kind of introduce yourself, and then see if the council has questions.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here. It would be an honor to serve the City of Commerce. Please forgive me, my 12-hour allergy medicine just decided to wear out. Texas PACE Authority started as a 501c3 in 2015 because it occurred to us that it was unreasonable to expect cities and counties to be able to put this program together and run it with current resources. We know how challenged everybody is in Texas. We also knew that with 254 counties and almost 1,200 cities, that this program was never going to be attainable for small business. Second PACE program in Texas using the PACE in a Box model of best practices, both in terms of underwriting and in terms of technical standards. We will not approve a project on behalf of the city unless an independent engineer validates that the savings from that project will exceed the total cost of that project. So we're quality control. I often feel like I'm the church lady because we really want these projects to succeed, and we want this program to be around as a quality program 20 years from now. And the only way to do that is to just plod along and do it right. It won't work for every project, but where it works, it's a wonderful thing. And we're trying to help businesses do what they want to do. If they can stop spending money, so much money on utilities, and utility prices are going up, and they can put that into new people, or in the case of a nonprofit, into the core mission, then we've done a good thing. And we'll never have a huge staff. We don't need a huge staff. We're not going to need a lot of money to do this right. And we will continue to lower our user fees as volume increases. So as you move forward today, and thank you for doing that, I would hope that you'll reach out to us and we'll reach out to you. Nobody can use a program they don't know about. So if you're involved in a Rotary or a chamber or religious organizations that need something like this to lower their operating expenses, we would like to work with you because education and outreach is always the first step. And then contractors, so roofers, lighting folks, plumbers, HVAC, and mechanical folks. This is a chance for them, instead of doing repairs on equipment that should have been replaced years ago, they can now actually provide the installation of better equipment. So not only will we be helping the buildings in Commerce, but we hope to really expand job opportunities and economic opportunities for everybody.
Ms. Charlene, do I remember correctly that one of the first PACE projects in Texas was a church?
It was a house of worship. It was
Yeah.
a synagogue in
Yeah.
Austin. We've also facilitated the New Birth Baptist Church, a huge solar project in Fort Worth. Those are very meaningful for me.
And so it's not just large corporate and business owners that can benefit from a program like this. Nonprofits that need to make renovations and updates to aging facility, this becomes a tool that they have access to that makes it more cost effective to update and improve their aging facilities as well.
That's
so-
exactly right. And what, in order to make this truly available for small business and nonprofits, we need to get local banks and credit unions to look at this. PACE can be a great new product for their best customers. And so there's a lot of education that will need to happen now that you've opened the store, and we look forward to working with all of you to figure out how to get the word out. People normally need to hear this 2 or 3 times for the light bulb to go off, because it is a different, it's a really different way to approach a problem in the marketplace. And I love it because while it requires community action, it doesn't require taxpayer dollars. And the whole thing is entirely voluntary. There's no mandates. But people need to learn about it first.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions? All right. Thank you very much for coming tonight. So do we have a motion?
I move that we approve a professional services agreement between the City of Commerce, Texas, and Texas Property Assessed Clean Energy Authority, PACE.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 8,
Thank you, Ms. Charlene.
discussion and possible action on a resolution by the City of Commerce City Council denying Encore Electric Delivery Company, LLC's application to increase rates related to Encore's statement of intent to increase rates filed on or about May 13th, 2022, requiring the reimbursement of municipal rate case expenses and declaring an effective date. Mr. Lisenby.
Mayor, Council, I want to thank Larry for being here, and at some point we'll invite him up. But I want to provide a little bit of context and background that is not intended to be directed at Larry, because we love Larry and the work that he does. In May of 2022, Encore Electric submitted a intent to raise their fees across the state of Texas. And they were looking to increase revenues by approximately $251 million annually, which would have trickled down to about a 4.5% increase to our citizens' electric bills. And in Texas, the Public Utility Commission, or the PUC, they review these rate cases. And the City of Commerce purchases, Abilene did too when I was there, we're members of purchasing cooperatives, and so cities bind together and buy electricity because you get more buying power than one little community buying electricity by themselves. And so we had an opportunity to respond to that increase for a rate adjustment. And so back then, we took action to pause or table that rate request. Because as a municipality, as a home rule municipality, we have original jurisdiction over the rates that are charged to the citizens of our community. And so we could have, at that point, approved the rates that they requested. But we chose to say, nah, hold up, and table that request so that some of our consultants could begin to review that case. And so the purchasing cooperative that we're a part of did an extensive review, and their findings were that they made a case back to the PUC that Encore was requesting an additional $251 million. They decided we need to reduce that by $211 million, and so our consulting team said they're asking for $40 million too much, or we'll give them $40 million. They're asking for $211 million too much. Well, there are other cities in Texas that have other representation that did their own evaluations. And so all of that has now resulted in the request before the Public Utility Commission is not to allow Encore to raise revenue by $251 million, but to actually reduce current revenue by $275 million. So Encore has asked for a rate increase. These groups within the state of Texas have come back and counter-offered, why don't you reduce revenues by this amount? So there's still a lot of fighting yet to be done in Austin, and Little Commerce doesn't want to get caught in the middle of that. But at this point, it is staff's recommendation that we deny that rate request and let the PUC figure it out. Because that process, that's the reason the Public Utility Commission exists, is the utilities that operate something as a monopoly, they work back and forth to figure out what is the rate that the public should pay. And we are willing to take whatever the PUC settles with. But until that gets settled, our job is to say, no, we deny this rate increase, and then we'll see where it lands. And so staff is recommending the approval of a resolution that denies the rate increase for the citizens within our jurisdiction. And Larry, if I butchered that completely, you're welcome to yeah. Yeah. Okay.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions from the council for Mr. Lisenby? If not, do we have a motion?
I move that we deny the rate increase of Encore.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 9, discussion of possible action on a resolution approving an engagement letter with Scott Singleton, Fincher and Company to provide audit services for the City of Commerce for the period beginning October 1st, 2021 and ending September 30th, 2022, there being the fiscal year 2022, and authorizing the mayor and his designee to execute any necessary documentation. Ms. Campbell.
All right, so good evening, Mayor and Council. I know everybody's really excited. We're about to start our audit for fiscal year 2022. So before you, you have the engagement letter from Scott Singleton, Fincher and Company. They have been our auditor for some time. But I want to kind of draw your attention to the differences in this engagement letter than what we've had in the past. Because we received the Corona State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, which is another word for the ARPA funds, we received a little over $2 million. And these are the funds that we've been using to fund for premium pay for our public safety, some revenue recovery, some other small projects, and we have until 2024 to spend these funds, okay? But we got them in 2 lump sums. We just got the other one about 2 weeks ago. Because of that, there's a rule that says if you receive any kind of either state or federal funding over $750,000, you have to have what's called a single audit. And that single audit kind of takes everything you've done for these grant programs and looks at them line by line by line, which obviously has a much higher cost associated with it, since our audit is mainly based on an hourly cost. In the final ruling for these funds, we are what is considered in an NEU, which is a non-entitled or non-entitlement unit, which means we're so small that they're kind of like, well, you're really little, so we're going to make it easy for you. If you were not going to get that threshold of $750,000, if it wasn't for this grant program, we're going to give you an opportunity to do this other audit, which is a much simpler kind of version of a single audit. And so I worked with the auditors. We worked on it a couple of weeks. We went through, we read everything. We made sure that we qualified for this audit. They made sure, I made sure. And so because we're going to qualify for this alternative audit, that's where you see this additional section that's been added to our engagement letter. We are anticipating, of course, for it to add cost, but they do have a not to exceed cost in there. I've been taking very, very detailed supporting documents, so I'm hoping to limit the amount of time that they spend on the audit and get, pass with flying colors like we do every year. But that's the main change. Everything else is very similar to what we've seen in years past. We always have a do not exceed dollar amount in there. In the past few years, we have not even hit that number. We have not come close to that number. I've also asked them the last 2 years to separate out the actual dollar amount for the EDC's portion of the audit, so I can use this towards intercompany billing for the EDC. So if you have any questions about the audit and their engagement letter, I'm happy to answer them.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Campbell? There being none, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Item 10, public hearing, discussion, consideration, and possible action on a resolution approving a request by Cynthia Curry of the Morris Street Commons Incorporated for approval of a replat and alley abandonment, Lot 4, W.J. Taylor addition of the City of Commerce, Hunt County. Legal description is a Taylor addition number 1, Block 4, Lot 4, acres .1672, A2 apartment dwelling district. Mr. Harper.
Thank you. So we were approached probably in the spring with this request to abandon the alley and replat this property. And at the time, our main concern with the alley abandonment was, were there any utilities in the alley? So we required the applicant to locate, if any, utilities were in the alley. There were none from all utilities. And with the replat of this alley, it would actually bring the lot into compliance even more so than it already is. P&Z last Wednesday recommended approval 5-0.
Are there any questions for Mr. Harper?
So they're just adding this property to the current lot? That's all they're doing? Do they have plans for it, or what?
No, it's just, they didn't even know it was theirs until they did their survey.
Okay.
And their survey showed that they actually thought it was theirs already. And, they didn't know it was an alley,
Okay. And they were having it surveyed for what?
for their own purposes. I'm sure it's, for their property value.
Okay.
Typically, replats that are 4 lots or fewer has the ability for an administrative approval, and it wouldn't come to the council. But we were not comfortable administratively approving the abandonment of an alley. And so we wanted to bring it through P and Z and through the council. We don't feel that there's any harm to the public by abandoning this alley. There are no utilities there. And so, as John said, we recommend approval.
Any other questions? If not, it is 7 o'clock, and I open the public hearing. There being no one coming forward, it is 7 o'clock, and I close the public hearing. Thank you, John. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second?
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 11, discuss and possible action on an ordinance to amend ordinance 2021-27, which adopted the fiscal year 2022 capital improvements plan to increase the budget for the animal shelter expansion project. Mr. Lisenby.
Mayor and council, as you'll recall, as part of the FY22 CIP or capital improvements plan, there were a number of projects that were approved and created. And so you should all have, we handed out this spreadsheet that covers what the details were of some of those projects. And so one of the projects in FY22 was either the development of a new animal shelter or the expansion of our existing animal shelter. And so based on cost per square foot estimates at the time, we felt like a budget of $1.5 million would allow us to improve the services that we provide to our community for animals and animal shelters. As many of us are aware, since that time, the construction industry has become somewhat aggressive and pricing has changed. But as we've progressed through the design process, we started with what's called programming. And so you meet with the architects, and we met with the contractor, and we met with the staff, and we started talking about what are the needs of our community and what do we anticipate the needs to be in the coming years as our community grows. And we created a list of all the services that we need to provide, all the services we would like to provide, what's the level of service we want to be able to give to the community. And so out of that programming discussion, the architects began to draw and design and come up with what would possibly work. And so the first draft of what would include everything that we put on the wish list, if you will, that design had an estimated budget of $2.6 million. And we have a budget of $1.5 million. So I told the architect and the contractor, yeah, we can't do that. I don't have 2.6, I only have 1.5. So I said, cut out some of the things that we would like to have but don't have to have. So let's trim this back and see how far we can go. And so they trimmed out some of the optional things that we were wishing for and left a building that had the capacity to meet our needs but didn't have all of the stuff that we wanted to provide the community. That budget came in at $1.9 million. I reminded them I only have $1.5 million and we can't build that. So I told the architect and the contractor, go back to the table and show me what I can get for 1.5, because that's my budget. And so they went back and did some redesign, and they presented what you have as option 3. Under the current construction climate and what pricing is, option 3 is the amount of building that we can get for $1.5 million. And so that adds 14 additional kennels to the existing shelter. I want to say 27-ish kennels approximately is what we have in the current building. That's about 27 kennels to meet the needs of our community and portions of Hunt County. And 27 kennels is no longer enough. The $1.5 million budget will give us an additional 14 kennels and an improved space for the public to come in and work on adoptions. And so it gives us a much nicer public-facing facility. If you haven't visited the animal shelter right now, when you come in our front door, in the lobby is also the cat room. And so there are cages full of cats in the lobby when you first walk in the door. And so we have people that want to come to the shelter, but they have cat allergies. They literally can't walk in the door because they're confronted with cat allergens. And so we want, as a minimum, to create a new public-facing space for the public to interact. And that shows, industry shows that improves your adoption rates. It improves the services that you provide. So the 1.5 gives us a new front-facing place for the public to come in and an additional 14 kennels. 14 additional kennels doesn't provide the capacity to meet the growing need of our community and where we project our community to be in the coming years. And so the $1.9 million budget, that project gave us an additional 30 kennels. So if we have 27 now and we give an additional 30 kennels, we've effectively doubled the capacity of the service we can provide to the community. And that project is about $400,000 over the budget we have right now. And so what we're asking for in consideration is increasing the project budget from 1.5 million. We want to add an additional 500,000 to make it an even $2 million project. And that will build the facility that gives us the capacity we need to meet the growing needs of our community. It's still trimmed back. There are still some pieces that we would like to be able to offer, but not $500,000 worth of like to. And so what staff is requesting is in next year's, the 23 CIP that you've adopted, we're asking you to adopt this ordinance to amend the original budget of that project from 1.5 to 2 million. And the way we're proposing to fund it, in the 23 CIP, we're looking to do reconstruction on East Sterling Hart, on Oak Lane, and begin reconstruction of Monroe. Monroe is a very large project and is going to have to be phased over 2 years because of how big of a project it is. And so what we're proposing is to take $500,000 of the Monroe Street project, move that into 2024, and then use $500,000 in 23 to complete the budget for the animal shelter. Because I'm not going to build all of Monroe anyway in 23. So this takes some of that funding, moves it into 24, and it allows us to fully fund the animal shelter at a capacity that meets the needs of our community without delaying or stopping street reconstruction. And so there was some question as to whether or not we could use fund balance to supplement this project. The technical answer is yes. You have the authority to authorize fund balance. I'm not comfortable with that. And one of the reasons why, apologies to the city attorney, but because it's not animal shelter project, but we currently have a major water leak on our treated water line coming into town at the river crossing of the Sulphur River. And I am honestly losing sleep because if that line blows, we have no way to bring water into town. So we've got engineers scrambling, figuring out what that repair is. The cheap repair for that is $350,000. And the suppliers have the pipe right now on the shelf. I can go get the pipe and we can start the project. But the cheap solution's $350,000. The better solution's $500,000. Well, I have that money in fund balance right now, and that's why we carry fund balance. And so if I take fund balance and apply it to the animal shelter project that's not an emergency, I've now lost the ability to respond to emergencies. And so we'll be calling a meeting very soon to talk about the water line project because we need authorization for that. But we are proposing to increase the animal shelter budget using funds we already have planned for 2023. It doesn't delay or stop street reconstruction, but it allows us to accomplish the capacity within the shelter that meets the needs for current and the growth that we are anticipating. And so the ordinance we have in front of you would amend last year's CIP to change the original project budget, and this is how we're proposing to fund it. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Lisenby?
By the way, no apology was necessary. It was
Thank you.
this was all part of the appropriate discussion.
Well, I have several questions about the animal shelter, and it will be taking us too long to get it done tonight.
Sure.
What I would like for us to do is not to make a decision tonight, but to put this in a workshop so that we can discuss it in detail and then be able to make a more informed decision on how we're going to, why we want to move the money, and is it enough money?
Okay.
Do we really need to look for more money or not?
Okay. So you want to have a workshop? We'd talked about first Tuesdays of the month being potential workshop dates. So we'll look at the calendar, but the first Tuesday of November,
Is election.
it's an election day. And so we'll look at putting a workshop on the calendar so that we can discuss that in detail. I'll probably see if the architect is available to come in and visit with us as well.
Great.
So what
Thank you.
we'll be doing tonight is tabling it until the next month.
So I move that we table this proposal until we have a workshop.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Lisenby.
Thank you.
Item 12, second reading, public hearing, and consideration of an ordinance approving a conditional use permit to allow mini warehouses for the property located at 2301 Mangum Street, Commerce, Texas, property ID 30389, legal description A0675, and this is in the General Business District. Mr. Lisenby.
Mayor, Council, one of the things that was brought up tonight during public comment is introducing the ideas and the concept of zoning regulations and the city's authority under the Texas Constitution to regulate land use. And so I'll kind of try to give the Cliffs Notes version of why zoning is important for local communities. But when you take a group of people and they decide to live together in close proximity to each other, conflict arises when you have people in close proximity to each other. In an attempt to regulate and ensure the peaceful use of private property, cities have the ability to regulate what are the allowed uses for properties and areas and sections of the property within our community. And so at some point in the past, the City of Commerce adopted a planning and zoning, they adopted a zoning map, and they created zones within the community. And in that zone, there are lists of what are allowable uses. And so on that list, by right, you can do anything on that list you want within your property. But there are some uses that are not allowed in zones because they conflict with the peaceable enjoyment of other people's properties. So typically in a residential zoned area, there's a pretty exhausted list of the things that are not allowed. And so we will have the opportunity and the ability to look at our current zoning regulations. We already have things on the books for dance halls. You can't open a dance hall in a residentially zoned area. But what people do is throw a party at their house and claim it's just a party at the house. Oh, no, not really. And so when we find them, we try to get them to submit dance hall permits that we say no to. But how that applies to this case is over by the city's water tower across from Fix and Feed, there's already a mini warehouse or a storage unit complex there. And so there's a property owner that is just to the north of that existing storage unit facility that owns that property, and it's zoned general business. And in general business in that zone, again, there's a list of things that you can do by right. There's a list of things that you can't do, but then there's a list of things you can do if you get permission. And the permission is a conditional use permit. We will allow you to use this property in this manner with these conditions. And one of the reasons that's important is this general business zone abuts directly with a residential zone. And so you've got potential business uses that are right across the property line from residential uses, and we need to make sure we think through carefully how that happens, because if those uses are not compatible, it creates conflict. And so the applicant here is asking for the ability to build about 200 units of self-storage that would kind of be wrapped around and at the location that is our city water tower. And that is allowed if they get a conditional use permit. So they brought their application to the zoning commission. They heard the request. There were some members of the residential neighborhood adjacent that were opposed because they didn't really want that use across the fence from their backyard. And so the recommendation from zoning was grant the conditional use permit, allow that use, one, because there's already a storage unit there, so it's consistent with how the land's being used, but they put two conditions on it. One, you have to put in a screening element between your use and the residential property that is either a fence that visibly screens the residential area from your storage use, or it could be the back wall of your facility that serves as the screen so that the residential use isn't impacted by the commercial use that's across the property line. The second condition was any outdoor lighting that you install has to be pointed away from the residential area. Because if there is self-storage, there's a security issue. So you want to have lights, but nobody wants those big bright lights shining in their back bedroom window. And so the zoning recommended approval of the conditional use permit with screening and with restrictions on outdoor lighting so that was pointed away from the residential area. And so council has considered this ordinance on a first reading and it was approved. Tonight is the second reading of that ordinance, and if passed, it would grant the applicant conditional use permission to begin to move forward with the design and installation of storage units. And so I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Lisenby?
Just a couple of comments. Usually when I see this an ordinance come through or a change, and we have comments from the community, you know, I really look for them to come here, that way they can voice their own opinion. But at the same time, we had one came on the first reading and he didn't, and they didn't write any comments. So I'll reach out to those individuals just to see, okay, this is not going to be anything that's going to necessarily hurt you, but I can understand where you're coming from.
Right.
I just want to know where the mindset's at. And they did have some concerns. Thank you for covering those concerns, because what I was going to say, you said.
Yeah.
One of the main concerns they were talking about were rodents. And, you know, any storage facility, you're gonna run into problems like that. And I explained that to them. And, other than that, the fencing and everything, that pretty much sums up
Yeah.
their concerns. And, we had 2 people to write in, but it was several people that just didn't write in that were concerned.
Okay.
So we wanna make sure that when we're making decisions that we do consider it's gonna be more than 1 or 2 people that wrote in that it's gonna affect.
Yes, sir.
But thank you for, touching on that because it clarifies a lot of things I talked to them about.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? There being none, do we have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we do. So it is 7:19, and I open the public hearing. There being no one coming forward, at 7:20, I close the public hearing. So do we have a motion?
I move that we accept the ordinance approving a conditional use to allow many warehouses at the property located at 2301 Mangum Street, Commerce, Texas.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 13, second reading, discussion and possible action on an ordinance amending ordinances 2021-08 and ordinance 2021-22 to reflect modified City of Commerce water and wastewater rates. Mr. Lisenby.
Mayor and council, thank you. As part of the adoption of our fiscal 23 operating budget, as well as our FY23 capital improvements program, we continue to have capital needs and operational needs within our water and wastewater utility. And last year, as part of our budget process, we did an evaluation and a reassessment of our utility rates, how they're structured and how they're charged. And prior to that, it had been almost 8 years since the utility had done a meaningful adjustment to their rates. And so what we found over that 8-year period is that we had a number of years that the utility was actually losing money and was not cash flowing. And so the reserves that they had maintained got drawn down to critically low levels. And so last year when we redesigned the utility rates, there is something of a commitment that we have to stay on top of that. We can't wait 8 years and find out that we should have kept up with rates. And so what this does is it's just a small incremental step in making sure that the utility rates that we're charging both cover our operational costs and allow for us to continue to invest capital in our infrastructure to repair some of the problems that we have. As an example, the water leak that we're talking about, when those happen, you don't plan those. That wasn't on TJ's calendar that, next year have water leak at the river. But we have to respond to those. And so the utility needs to be in a financially healthy position so that we can react and respond to those types of events. And so this rate adjustment keeps us ahead of the operational cost and the capital requirements of our utility. However, I do want to point out that when we restructured our utility rates in last year's budget, I want to remind the council and the public that may be watching this now or later, 36 to 40% of our households in Commerce have a total annual income of $25,000 a year or less. So over a third, almost 40% of the homes in our community are very low income homes. And so we need to be mindful of that when we structure these utility rates. And so one of the things that we did is we created what the industry calls a lifeline rate. And if you look at typical residential consumption of water, basic domestic water needs for a family are usually met with 4,000 to 5,000 gallons of water per month. And so the way our rates are structured is for residential customers, that first 4,000 gallons of water, we protect that consumption with a lower water rate. So the cost of their basic domestic needs is not overwhelming their $25,000 a year household budget. And so this adjustment does not touch or increase that lifeline rate. And so what we did is we added $1 to the base meter charge, and then the higher tiered consumptions added $1 per thousand. And so for 60 to 65% of our residential customers, their utility bill is going to go up $1. And that's the vast majority of our residential customers. And so this rate adjustment allows us to stay on top of our operational costs. It allows us to continue to invest in the capital needs of our system while still protecting that lower income class of customers within our community. At some point, those rates will have to move a little bit, but we will always keep in mind that lifeline rate and the impact it has on our senior citizens and our low-income customers. And so staff is recommending approval of the second reading, and these rates provide sufficient revenues to recover the cost of our utility and to allow for continued capital improvements to keep this system sustainable. We'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Lisenby? There being none, do we have a motion?
Make motion that we approve on second reading.
Second?
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 14, second reading, discussion and possible action on the adoption of an ordinance amending Appendix C, fees, rates, and charges of the City of Commerce Code of Ordinances fee schedule and providing an effective date. Chris Bassim. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Again, this is a second reading, amending this chapter 42. This is a little bit of housekeeping. It's basically including different things that were left out of the last one. It's including equipment fires, gas leaks, commercial incident, as well as some fire marshal fees. And it's moving our fee ordinance that somehow got left off the Muni Code section back on there and aligning it with FEMA rates instead of just rates that we try to come up with. It puts a national standard on those rates. Other than that, it's pretty standard and nothing changed from the first reading. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Are there any questions for the chief? There being none, do we have a motion?
I move approval on the second reading.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Chief. Item 15, council comments. Pursuant to the Texas Government Code 551.0415, the purpose of this section is to allow the mayor and each city council member the opportunity to announce city events / community interest and request that all items be placed on future city council agendas. So we will start with Councilman Henry. Any comments for the public?
Just real simple. City staff, those here and are not here, thank you for everything you do.
Excellent. Appreciate that. Councilman Mueller.
I'd just like to give an early happy birthday to our city secretary, Molly. Her birthday is tomorrow. So happy birthday.
All right. I do have a few things that a few folks I would like to recognize. For the city commerce, we are more than downtown. However, downtown commerce is the heartbeat of commerce. Since our last city council meeting, we have had 3 very successful events in our downtown area, the Boat Ark Bash being one of them. So I wanted to publicly say thank you to the city staff for all the support to the Chamber of Commerce and all the many volunteers that put on the Boat Ark Bash. I thought it was very successful this year. I also would like to say thank you to the Downtown Alliance. They put on what was called a pop-up shop. So we had merchants downtown that actually hosted pop-up vendors being folks that do not have the typical brick and mortar type businesses. And so that was conducted in the evening, and it was extremely successful. It brought a lot of people downtown that don't frequent the downtown area. And so I appreciate the Downtown Alliance for that. The last group I wanted to recognize was we had a first annual chili cook-off and bike ride. This was a fundraiser for the CASA. This very first time event raised $5,364 for CASA. So much appreciated. Always fundraisers for nonprofit organizations are appreciated, and downtown is always glad to host those events. Councilman Thompson.
You just took my comments.
Sorry, I made my notes earlier today.
No, you just sat in front of me.
Calculated. All right, Councilman Ayers.
I just want to mention looking forward to what's becoming kind of an annual event in Commerce. The Rotary Club is going to have the Waves of Glory again this year. That honors our veterans and first responders. There'll be over 200 flags placed at the city park at Aldridge and Park Streets. And they'll be there from November 5th through 11th. And then on November 6th is a Saturday at 10 a.m. They'll have an opening ceremony with lots of different events to open that installation. So it should be a really good event honoring our veterans and first responders.
All right. Thank you very much. Item 16 on the agenda, City Manager's Report. Mr. Lisenby.
Mayor, Council, let me begin with as good a response as I can provide to some of the public comment that was provided today. It was all very thoughtful and brings very valid and real issues. And so there may be further discussions and action that we need to put on a future agenda. But regarding the parties that happen around town, historically they happen on homecoming week. The week of homecoming for the university sees a major increase in the number of events that happened. Prior to me being here, there's some history with these events that the campus used to make space for some of these events to happen on the campus, and over time the events grew and became more unruly and got to the point where they were damaging campus facilities, and it was creating environments on campus that were no longer safe. So the campus basically closed their availability and said these events can't happen in our campus facilities because of how unsafe they had become. So the events shifted to some private venues and some private clubs, even some of them outside of town, that ultimately ended up in, as I understand, a shooting, a death, and so they became increasingly violent, and they weren't even in our community anymore. And so the private venues began to get shut down, and so then they started using public parks. And for the last number of years, I know the 2 years that I've been here, we allowed the use of Ivory Moore, which is a public park on the far eastern edge of town, and they would have 300, 500 college students at parties, and it would be more than just one. And every time there would be some kind of damage to our park. There would be efforts that our staff would have to do to come in behind them and clean up and restore some sense of usability into our park spaces. And with the recent investment that the council authorized in the new playground, we put about $350,000 worth of equipment into Ivory Moore. And so this year the decision was made, we're not going to make that park available to these parties because history indicates they will destroy what we just invested and put in for our community. And the party planners were not happy. They were upset that we weren't making that available to them anymore. But one of the consequences is we closed that location. they're going to go try to find somewhere. And so many of these events are put on by self-appointed event planners. They come in from the Metroplex. They do charge admission, and there's a lot of activity that happens. They bring security to their parties that may or may not be real security, and it's becoming difficult to manage because the campus doesn't want them on the campus. I don't want them tearing up our parks. We have ordinances in place that prevent dance halls or requires them to get a permit to outline what they want to do for their dance hall, and they don't follow those policies. So what ends up with is you have a party potentially in a residential neighborhood with several hundred students, and we will have on any given evening 2 patrol officers, and asking our officers to walk in to a party with several hundred people, not necessarily a safe environment. And so we do need to try to figure out a solution to this. We've had a number of conversations with the campus. We've had conversations with campus police. We haven't found the magic bullet, and we haven't found the easy button. I wish there was an easy button that we could hit. And so we are aware, and we continue to look for solutions. But some of the limitations that will impact us, we are not just a business, we're a government. And so government can't take away freedom of speech. Government can't take away freedom of expression without some due process. And so I spoke earlier about our powers of zoning. We can regulate where and how things happen, but under the Constitution, I can't blanket forbid, thou shalt not do that in our town, because that violates somebody's constitutional rights, and the courts have held that up, and I'll defer to the attorney for that. What we can do is try to regulate where they happen and regulate how they are conducted so that they're done in a safe way. Stacking 100 people in a single-family residential home is not safe in any stretch of the imagination. Plenty of violations of fire code. The problem is, how do we control it and contain it? And we haven't found an elegant solution to that yet, but we continue to try to find that solution. So we'll have further conversations with the university. They've got to be involved. It's their students that are involved in this, and so they've got to be involved in the solution. And so at some point, we'll bring some solutions to you. Mayor, if you want to create a task force, we're willing to entertain that. But we kind of have an impromptu task force that's been working on it. We just haven't found solutions that work yet, but we'll continue to use it. One of the comments was made, we also have received feedback, not just the no parking signs on Sycamore. The residents along Harlow requested that we come in, and they requested we create no parking, and so we did, and now they're complaining that there's too many signs. And so we're getting the feedback that there's too many signs. Well, our experience has been, if we put a sign at the beginning of the block and we put a sign at the end of the block, everybody parks in the middle, and when you write them a ticket, they go, there's no sign. So you put a sign in the middle of the block, and they park between the signs, and when they get a ticket, there's no sign. And so over time, we put signs like every so many feet so that it's impossible for you to park there and claim you didn't see a sign. But we've probably gone too far, and there may be too many signs, and we can peel some of that back. So we'll find a happy medium there. But the statement was made that we issued an easement on Sycamore. The city has not issued any easements. That's a legal document. That's a legal status, and we have not issued any easements, parking or otherwise, for any of the residents on Sycamore Street. What we did try to do is recognize that the occupants of that home have a need to park somewhere, and we don't have a good solution yet. Those homes were built before there were zoning standards that required setbacks. And so the front yard isn't big enough to create parking spaces safely there. So we may need to do some more work and some more evaluations. And then my last comment, Mr. Higgins, thank you for being here. I know James. James and I have had several conversations about truck routes. And so there are technically correct steps that we can take to put up truck route signs, and the truckers are going to ignore them, whether they have lights on them or not. And TxDOT will admit it's increasingly hard to enforce truck routes. Part of the reason has nothing to do with us or TxDOT. If you use Google Maps, if you use Apple Maps, if you use Waze, most of these truckers have some kind of GPS mapping system, and they say, I need to go from point A to point B, and they just follow the line. And the line will have them drive down streets that are not truck routes. And trying to change that to some degree is like trying to stop the tide. But there are some things that we can try to do to improve the situation, but don't be surprised if we put up truck route signs and they go down them anyway. And so finding a way to enforce that, because you can put up a truck route sign and you can say you can't go down there, but there are exceptions that allow them to go down there. If they're making a delivery, there's certain exceptions. You can't stop them from taking that route, and you can't write them citations. And unfortunately, at the end of North Neal is an industrial customer that has deliveries. And deliveries is one of the exceptions that we, under state law, can't stop. And so at some point, I think the only ultimate solution is going to be rebuild North Neal, widen it, and make it more of a thoroughfare. But that's not a good solution either. So we recognize truck traffic is a problem, and Mr. Adkins with TxDOT would love to give the city Park Street so that they don't have to deal with it anymore. But TxDOT is increasingly more willing to give streets away as long as the cities take over the responsibility for that. But that is a major traffic thoroughfare that we would then assume the liability for, and we're struggling to take care of some of our residential streets, much less what are state highways. So it's, I'm not immediately going to step up and volunteer to take over responsibility for Park Street, because Live Oak got repaved because it's a TxDOT right-of-way, and TxDOT paid to repave Live Oak. And at some point, I want TxDOT to redo Park Street. They're getting ready to redo the intersection of Park and Main Street. As long as it's a state right-of-way, I can make them pay for some of those improvements that our community needs. So it's a valid conversation, and we are also concerned with truck traffic. From my experience, you put up a sign, they're going to ignore it, and yeah, they do. If you turn off of 224 on Charity, before you get to that, there's a no truck sign. As soon as you make the turn, there's multiple no truck signs because there's a very aggressive S-curve, and they get stuck there every time because they've ignored all the signs. It's a real challenge that we'll continue to try to deal with. But we always welcome comment from the public, and if we can find creative solutions that are effective, we are all on board with trying to figure out what those solutions are. Mayor, I'm going to hand it over to our finance director for a quick finance update, and then we'll move through the rest of the report.
Thank you.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. So we're just going to jump into our August financials. I know that we've already adopted an amendment to our budget for FY23, but because our financials are always like a month behind, because we have to book entries and things, that's why you're just now seeing August, okay? Does anybody have any questions on where we stand in August? When it comes to our general fund, we are still overall coming in over budget, under budget when it comes to the revenues, but mainly that's just because of the transfer for the ARPA funds, and we're coming in under budget on our expenses. I've added a little section this time at the bottom that kind of talks about our reserve ratio, where we've budgeted and where we're kind of projecting us to be kind of now that we're coming to the end of the fiscal year. Our existing reserve ratio at the end of our audit last year was 40% for the general fund. And so we tried to budget according to the fund balance policy that you guys kept, or that you guys passed this year, is that we try to stay within 35% of that when we budget, okay? So just kind of keep those numbers in mind. So what we budgeted last year was to stay at that 40%. What I'm projecting is that we're going to end closer to 58%. But a lot of that has to do because we did so well on the revenue side, and directors were really on point with their budgets. They stayed on top of them, and that the ARPA funds really do help. Any questions about the general fund? Okay. Public utilities. Public utilities, after we did our budget adjustment, I went back and I've applied that budget adjustment. So now you can kind of see, and we only adjusted solid waste here in the public utility fund. So now you can see that it's kind of falling within budget, it's under budget. We're coming in pretty close to where I'm estimating our revenues to be. So we'll finish a little bit above budget for revenues, under budget for expenditures. This is the fund that we know that we've had to work on our fund balance. So going into the year, our reserve ratio was at 18%, and our goal is to get a minimum of 25. I think that we're going to be very, very close to that this year. Right now, I'm projecting 35. I think it might drop still a little bit just because we have one more month of true up entries and things like that for September. But I do think that because we have been proactive with adjusting water rates and that sort of thing, and not only that, but when we go out for our debt, we make our debt payments, we're looking for the best interest rates. We're looking for the best payment options for us. We're doing our due diligence. So when we may be budgeting a higher interest rate, we've been really lucky the last couple of years in it coming in actually a little bit better. I think that we're getting closer and closer to that minimum fund balance that we're trying to hit of that 25. And our goal is to be 45% in this fund. That's our goal. Any questions about public utilities?
Reminder, the reason why you want a higher fund balance in a utility fund is when something breaks, it's expensive. Just reminding you.
Got it.
Just in case you're worried about the leak that we have down at the end. So this just kind of summarizes everything, looking at where we are as a whole, where we are year to date compared to the budget, revenues, expenses. It really just kind of tableizes, charts out exactly what we just talked about. So this is general fund, public utilities. Any questions? All right, so jumping over into property tax. So as of September of 2022, we have received a total of $3.37 million in property tax revenue. So overall, we have met our budgeted tax levy of 98% for FY22. In our collections of our delinquent property tax, we reached 15% of our collections, or of our delinquent. Next month, you're going to see a new chart. So it's gonna start all over. It will start all over with October, it will start over with our new budgeted numbers. And next month, I'm gonna have an additional section that will be for our rebates and our abatements. Now that we're starting to see payments go out for the neighborhood empowerment zone property tax abatements and those types of things, I just want you to be aware of, these are the funds that were coming in, but this is what we agreed to, 2 years ago. And now you're starting to see that effect of it. And so it won't be astronomical, and it'll be a very small number at the bottom, but just be aware that you'll start seeing that on there, okay? Any questions on property tax? Wonderful. Sales tax. As of September 2022, we have received $1.4 million in sales tax revenue. This has surpassed both budget and last year's collections. Again, next month, you'll see these graphs restart in the sales tax. And I'm also going to be adding another column that's related to sales tax abatement payments, seeing as how we do have some agreements that will probably start paying out in this FY23. I just want you guys to be aware of where we are on that and be as transparent as possible. So overall, we came in over budget and we came in higher than we were last year. I just want to remind you that a lot of that has to do with inflation. A lot of that also has to do with a payment that was due to us for over a year that was missed, and that's what that big spike is. So hopefully that person remembers to make their large payment and we don't have another spike. So if we go over into our category analysis. So as of September, retail remains the largest category for generating sales tax and commerce. And as of right now, it's still accounting for about 57% of all of our collections. Last year, it was 52. And I also want to draw your attention to the manufacturing for last year. There was a large spike, but I want you to know that this amount was ultimately refunded back to the vendor. This is a third-party vendor that is not located here, so it's kind of like they're going to order it, it's going to get shipped here, we got the sales tax, and it was reimbursed back to that vendor. And so it was reimbursed back in November and in January. So even though it looks like, hey, we're not on trend as we were last year, it's just because there was one really large payment that we ended up paying it back anyway. So don't let it skew your numbers. It actually isn't very relevant, okay? Any questions about this one? Retail and your accommodations, these are just your normal trends, okay? So it's been the same, it's been holding steady. We've been holding steady over the last 3 years on our online sales. And I expect that's gonna continue unless there is gonna be some kind of legislative change on who gets the sales tax for online payments and who doesn't. We hope that it continues to be the shipping city, right? Or the city that the city that receives the goods, right? So that has really helped us as being a small city. Same thing for accommodation and food services. We see that trend growing. We keep seeing it growing. We keep seeing food services coming in and doing well here, doing better than they were before COVID. Which I don't think a lot of cities saw. We went to some accounting classes last week, and they talked about how COVID was hitting some other cities in different ways and sales tax ways. And I think Howdy and I were pretty proud to say that Commerce kind of finished ahead of schedule and above it. So, you guys have any questions for me? All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Campbell.
Ms. Mollett?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, City Manager. This is historically a little bit unusual, so we wanted to bring it to everyone's attention. We have a great chance for sub-freezing temperatures tonight in our area, which is, as I mentioned, pretty unusual for mid-October in our area. So here's your reminder to go home and protect your plants, protect your pipes, protect your pets. If you have any vegetation that's subject to freezing, bring those plants in, bring your pets inside. And then also the reminder that automatic sprinkler systems, should you have any that are scheduled to go off tonight, perhaps turn those off for the evening so you don't wake up to slick porches and slick walkways as you leave for your commute in the morning. Early voting, this is something we like to clarify every time we have an election. Historically, the city has early voting here at City Hall whenever the city has something on the ballot. When we have a municipal election or a bond, because the city doesn't have anything on the ballot in November, you still have the opportunity, of course, to early vote. You will have to go to Hunt County to do so for early voting. So we'll be pushing this information out. Every year we have people that trickle in and ask questions, can I come here to register to vote? Unfortunately, October 11th was the deadline to register to vote. You always have to register 30 days prior to an election day. So that deadline has passed. However, the opportunity for early voting begins October 24th and runs through November 4th. You can go to 2217 Washington Street, which is near downtown Greenville, to participate in early voting. And then City Hall, which is consistent with what we've done in the past, will be a voting site. You can come vote on Election Day, which is Tuesday, November 8th. We will be open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on that Tuesday. So if you don't have the opportunity to early vote in Greenville, certainly stop by City Hall on Tuesday, November 8th, so that you can vote at that time. If you recall, you all passed in your fee ordinance recently a special that the Commerce Animal Shelter runs the last 13 days of October. You can get 13% off all pet adoptions. So if you've had your eye on any pets on our social media pages, now's your opportunity. You may also recall every year in April and October, the city participates with the DEA and the National Drug Take Back. The city is a depository site for either prescription or over-the-counter unused or unwanted pharmaceuticals. It keeps it out of the public water system, keeps it out of the hands of our youth. It's certainly a good time to clean out your medicine cabinets. You can drop them by. We have a little drop box in the police department in the lobby. So if you can't participate officially Saturday, October 29th from 10 to 2, you can stop by at any time, 24 hours a day, drop those pharmaceuticals off and get them out of the house if they're unwanted or unused. Chris, do you want to add anything to that? I know that's... And we do this every year in October and April, but that drop box is always available to you as well. Councilmember Ayers already mentioned this, but I just wanted to remind you again of the, I believe it's the 4th annual this year, Waves of Glory that Commerce Rotary is hosting in honor of veterans and first responders. So certainly stop by. It's right there at the corner of City Park and Aldridge. They display over 200 flags, and it's a really beautiful site. Thalian's Culture Club, is hosting their annual drive-through Christmas toy drive right here at City Hall. That'll be taking place November 7th from 5 to 7. This benefits Commerce Little Angels. So if you have the opportunity, certainly now before the hustle and bustle of the holiday season, stop by, pick up some toys, and drop them by City Hall to benefit Commerce Little Angels. Our Commerce Beautification Commission has been meeting and working very hard on setting up this event. Ms. Cifuentes is a member of the Beautification Commission. She's been working on that as well as Ms. Duncan and all the members. They're hosting this recycling day. The city last did this prior to COVID in 2019, and it was very successful. So they're planning on hosting it again Saturday, November 12th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. They're doing this in conjunction with Commerce Beautification Commission, the Chamber of Commerce, and the university. It will take place at the corner of Walnut and Campbell Street. We'll start distributing these flyers so you can become more aware of what you can and can't drop off at this event. But we encourage you to participate. And finally, we have Omega's does their annual Feeding the Community event every year, where they provide a free Thanksgiving lunch for anyone. And that's on Thanksgiving Day from 9 a.m. to, I can't unfortunately read, 2 p.m., I think. And that'll take place at Omega's, so certainly stop by if you don't have Thanksgiving plans. And that's all I have.
Monty, one more thing. What are the dates of the citywide cleanup? I know I picked up a flyer at the desk. Do you have that? I know Section D. Do you know those dates?
So, Ms. Rita has been working on that, and I know that Ms. Kayla is working on a new flyer. And so, what we have found out is that in the past, the state is just, created. And so, Ms. Rita has been working on getting them created, and so we can get out.
Okay, but isn't there something going on in October? The one I picked up today?
I don't have a flyer. Do you mean, like, for that section?
The quarterly bulk item.
Quarterly?
I just don't have it, I just don't know it off the top of my head.
So I will say it's not entirely easy to navigate to, but if you go to our commercetx.org website
Okay.
and you go to departments and utilities, that calendar is there and we keep them up front as well.
Okay.
About the ones after November, the dates after.
No.
Yeah.
I think there's some that's going on in
They
October.
they typically take place on Wednesdays.
Okay.
So
There's
if
some
they,
going on in October.
I'm just not sure which area it is.
We'll find out.
Okay.
Wrapping up, we're still short-staffed in some critical areas, and so if anyone knows someone that is looking to start an illustrious career in public service, we would love to have them begin their career with us. And you can go to our website to figure out what those vacancies and postings are. In terms of project updates, there's a couple that I want to point out. If you've driven through Park Street and City Park, you've seen the big excavator and dirt is being moved. And so the splash park is under construction, and we'll be looking to have a project board up in the very near future that will show what the finished project is intended to look like, but that is moving forward. This week on Thursday, we opened bids for the airport fuel farm. And so we've already had one vendor submit a bid. We're expecting a couple of more. And so we'll know what that pricing comes in at when we get to the bid opening. And then the water treatment plant rehabilitation is still underway. The contractor's on site, making very good progress. If you'll recall, we have 6 filters at the plant. 3 of them are down for reconstruction right now, and that project is moving forward very well. And so we're looking forward to have a fully restored capacity at our water treatment plant in the near future. And the raw water project out at Lake Tawakoni is on track to complete ahead of our deadline from the state. The state has given us a very hard deadline of the end of December. Talking with the contractor, we're still on pace to meet that deadline. So that's very promising as well. And so we have a number of projects that continue to move forward. And if anyone has questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll close with Hunt County Days in Austin is March 1st and 2nd. Every biannual legislative session, they'll designate different days of the session being dedicated to certain counties. And so the Hunt County Legislative Group is going to be taking a group down to Austin to visit with our legislators and look at some of the things that are on the docket for consideration by the state legislature. If you don't follow that, I would encourage you to do so. We can provide you with some resources. It's an interesting time to be a legislator in Austin. And unfortunately, most of the time they have cities and local governments in the crosshairs. So we have to pay attention to what's going on down there. And so that concludes my report. Mayor, is there anyone have any questions that we can go over before we convene into executive session? Holly?
Ms. Thompson, and to answer your question, October 26th is Section C, and as a reminder, Section C is north side of Maple, east side of Park. And then we have one more left for the year, November 30th. Bulk trash pickup is Section D.
Okay, we do have a need to recess into executive session tonight. Pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, Chapter 551, Texas Government Code, the City Council will recess into executive session to discuss the following: consultation with attorney on a matter in which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with the Texas Open Meetings Act, and consultation with attorney regarding pending contemplated litigation. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. So at 8:05, I close the regular session, move to executive.
Answer in.
It is 8:44, and I call the City of Commerce City Council meeting back into order. There being no business resulting from our executive session, do I have a motion?
I so move that we adjourn. That.
Second.
Therefore, at 8:45, we adjourn the City Council meeting.
I am glad to be the entertainment this evening. Apparently.
The pin that I was